Okay, guys. Hello. Well, thanks for joining us again. And Bezrat Hashem, we'll learn something new. I hope you'll be okay with what we learn. Well, I mean, it doesn't really make a difference because at the end of the day, that's what Halacha is. We have to be careful with it. So, what we're going to look at is as summer now comes in, there's a proliferation, as we know clearly, of insects and all those other lovely things. So while it's beautiful to be able to see the great, incredible creation through all these beautiful, wonderful, amazing insects, the thing is that they can be somewhat irritating. And the question that I really wanted to look at is the extent of the irritation. Does that allow us to kill them? So, for example, you've got the mozzies. There's hundreds of mozzies, especially now, that are just all over. On a Shabbos, if it's irritating, what are we allowed to do with it? What can we do with it? And let's try and get there to understand it in a deep way. And when we understand it, then maybe we'll actually be able to really it will resonate with us, and we'll understand where it comes from. So let us go. I'm going to share my screen and bring up the source sheet. Okay, so there is so much on it. Just to start it off, they're different. All the malachas that we learn, they're different ones. As I said, I didn't want to learn the cooking and all those other ones, just because a lot of people have done that, and a lot of people have looked at that, and that's easy stuff to look at. Whereas what I wanted to look at some other things just to make our Hilchot Shabbat a little bit more different. So look, what I'm looking at now is a malacha of tzad. Now we're just looking at one aspect of it. Tzad is an enormous thing, and we'll see as we go through the source sheet where the parameters of it exist. But let's just start with this brisa. It's a brisa, Tana Rabbanan, we learn in a brisa. A brisa, just to remind everybody, is a saying of the great Tanaim that wasn't recorded in the Mishnah. It has equivalent weight for the most part, but it's just not recorded in the Mishnah. So Tana Rabbanan, we learn in a brisa. Hatzad chagavim, somebody who traps. Tzad means to trap, to hunt, but hunting via trapping. Hatzad chagavim, that's a locust. A gazim, tzra'in, vitushin. A yatush is a mosquito. So that's what the main thing here. Then a person who traps this says the brisa b'Shabbat is chayav. Meaning what? That if you see one of these things and you trap it, you put something over it, be it whatever it may be, you trap it in its place, chayav. You're obligated on, you're liable for the halachas of Shabbos. That's divrei Rabbi Meir. That's what Rabbi Meir says. But Chachamim omrim, and Chachamim say, hold on a second. Let's rephrase this and be careful. Kol shebamino nitzod chayav, v'chol she'en b'mino nitzod patur. They say the following: that if you normally would trap such a thing for your personal use, so then you chayav, and chayav means midoraisa, chayav means in the Torah. Then you would be chayav. And wherever you don't normally trap these things for your own personal use, then you patur. So nobody traps a mosquito for their personal use. And there's a great joke that they tell about the Japanese guy and the Chinese guy and the Jewish guy. They come back that the emperor now needs a new samurai, and he wants to appoint this new samurai. So he's got these three guys. So that he gets the Chinese guy goes first, and what they do is they take a little matchbox and they open up the matchbox, and out flies a mosquito, and the Chinese guy goes and he cuts the mosquito in half. That's mind-boggling. Imagine being able to cut a mosquito in half with your very, very sharp sword. So the emperor's thoroughly impressed. Then comes the Japanese guy, and they let out the mosquito, and he chops the mosquito into 4 pieces. Now that's mamish, unbelievable. Then the Jewish guy comes and he takes out his got like a small little knife. They let out the mosquito and he chops, and the mosquito goes and flies away. So everybody's looking and saying, well, what's that all about? So the Jewish guy says, Your Majesty, circumcision is not meant to kill. So I hope you all got that one. So the point is that nobody uses a mosquito for their own personal use. We don't trap mosquitoes for our own personal use. So if that's the case, when is one? What is it all about? So the Rambam tells us If you trap an old, lame, sick, young gazelle that wouldn't be able to run away on its own, patur, you're not obligated. And also he says, I'm a farik bahema chayav of mina matsuda patur. If you remove the beast, because remember, as the general rule, whatever you chayav to do, you chayav on undoing as well. But if you trap a wild animal or bird that are already in his possession, like geese, chickens, and pigeons, in other words, these are already domesticated birds, then obviously you're exempt because you're not trapping them. Imagine, because the manifestation of that would be, for example, if your dog runs out and you call him back in, then you lock him inside, or you lock him inside because some people don't like the dog, that would be considered to be trapping. So obviously, if it's a domesticated animal, you don't have to worry about trapping. You're not trapping him to trapping. You're just trying to sort out your household. And if you trap all these little things, little insects, that's also not the way that normally happens, and therefore, in this case, you would be patur. So from here we learn clearly that if you don't normally trap for personal use, you're not liable. Okay, and if that's the case, then we're going to start seeing something a little bit more. Al akrav shelo tishach. Now, what happens if you take a bowl or something like that, and you put it on top of an akrav, on top of a scorpion, in order that it doesn't bite you? So Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, Kol HaMazik Neragim b'Shabbos. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says you don't have to worry about that because you can anything that's going to do damage. Now let's carefully do this. Anything that's going to do damage, Neragim b'Shabbos, you can kill on Shabbos. Massive Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef says, hold on a second, you can't say that. Chamisha Neragim b'Shabbos. No. Our sages said there are only 5 creatures that you can kill on Shabbos. What are those? Zavuv Shaba Eretz Mitzrayim, an Egyptian fly. There's something about this fly in Egypt that makes it poisonous, and because it's poisonous, it could endanger the people that it's involved in. So we've got the Zavuv Shaba Eretz Mitzrayim, the Tzir Asher ben Ninveh, or the Tzir is like a hornet of some sort that one lives in Ninveh. Also, it's dangerous. The Akrav Sheba Chadyav. And the akrab, the scorpion in Chadyav, the nachash of Eretz Yisrael, and the poisonous snake in Eretz Yisrael, the kelev shoteh b'chol makom, and a mad dog in any place. And those are the things, those creatures are the creatures that you are allowed to kill because they're dangerous. And because they're dangerous, therefore, what trumps it all is the pikuach nefesh. Even if it's a suffix pikuach nefesh, these animals are dangerous. We have to be careful, and we go through. So at that point in time, let's just stop right now, because it's clear that there's a difference between different types of animals. The animals that you normally trap, the animals that you don't normally trap. They are your domesticated animals, and then there are non-domesticated animals. Then there are animals that are dangerous and animals that are not dangerous. And all of these things we have to take into consideration when we start thinking about the very simple question of, am I allowed to kill the mosquito on Shabbos that's flying around my bed and driving me nuts? Because that's really the question. We're not talking about running around killing mosquitoes. We're talking about that one mosquito, that's like on the roof that you see. And, that mosquito is going to disturb your entire Friday night. Now, what are you going to do with it? And, I've become quite good at throwing the cushion and getting the mosquitoes. So, but can you do that on Shabbos? That's the real question. Okay. So, says the Shulchan Aruch, Kol sheba mino nitzud, chayav alav. And the Shulchan Aruch says exactly what we've learned. That if the thing is not, it will normally be trapped, so then you're not chayav, and if it would be trapped, you are. It's asur. Hilchach, therefore, zevuvim afal pi she'en b'mino nitzud asur letzodan. Therefore, you can't trap flies; they are not normally trapped. So, what does that mean, right? What he means by that is that we don't normally trap the flies, but we do try. We don't want them, and since we don't want them, we have to be careful. We're patur. Patur means it's rabbinically. We're forbidden to do it. We're patur from the Torah perspective, but we're obligated rabbinically. And says the Ramah, therefore, you have to be careful that if there are flies or something or insects inside a certain box of some sort, you can't close it on Shabbos. Why? Because they have a psik reisha she'yitzodu sham. Because it's a psik reisha. Let's understand what psik reisha means. It's a psik reisha that they'll be trapped in there. So what is a psik reisha? So the psik reisha, I think we've spoken about it before, but it's where even though you don't intend the consequence, that consequence is going to happen anyway. A psik reisha is taken out from the example that's given, that you're going to cut off the head of the chicken. Psik reisha means cutting off the head, okay? And it's not going to die. Obviously, it's going to die. You may not want it to die. All you want is the head of the chicken, but it's still going to die. So the psik reisha is an action that ordinarily would be permitted, but will cause an unintended side effect of an action that would be forbidden. Therefore, you can't do it. Okay, so if that's the case, then we've got this thing that midrabanan, that anything that we're going to trap, any of these little like insects and things like that, that we need to understand that those things become things which are forbidden midrabanan. Okay, comes along the Shulchan Aruch and says, Zavuvim, sorry, the Torah says the following: Zavuvim af al pi she'en b'mina nitzod asur latzodan. Says we know that you cannot catch these the little flies, and lachen katav bala truma she'asur lin'ol b'shabbos hatevis sheyesh bazuvim. That's why he says you can't close that box. Ela yitain sakin or shum davar ben akisui lateva. So what do? You don't want the fly. So how do you trap it? So the way you're going to have to trap the fly and or get it out, as he says, is put like a knife or something so that's not completely closed, so that since it's not completely closed, you don't have to worry so much. Okay. So the other way of doing it is to catch them not with a box, but to catch them with a shinui. So, for example, if you've got all these mosquitoes running around, what you can do is you can take them with you can take a little like and it says like a mat over them or something like that will enable you to catch them. Okay. But the question really is, and I want to just get to that. Sorry, I've got a lot of information. The question is really, are you allowed to kill the mosquito? And there are different ways in which you would kill the mosquito. The one would be to spray some type of insect repellent on it. The other way would be to actually physically kill it. And let's try and see what that's all about. So we understand one thing is it's clear that if you're going to trap it, if you're going to somehow stop it from coming into your room, it's got to be in a way of a shinui. So now it says here, Rabbi Eli Mansour. Eli Mansour is a massive Talmid Chochem, is a Sephardi person, lives in Eretz Israel, lives in America, and is very well known amongst the more modern Orthodox community. So he says the following: Halacha would forbid spraying insect repellent in a manner that would invariably cause an insect to die. So you can't spray it directly on the insect. Or you may spray insect repellent only if he does so in the air, i.e. not directly on the insect. And you open at least one window to allow the insect to escape, because if you don't allow the insect to escape, then you've obviously killed the thing properly. The Chazon Ish, who is the Ashkenazi Posek, he ruled more stringently. He said one can spray under these conditions only, and listen carefully, there's an ill patient in the home for whom an insect caused discomfort. He's saying, Stam, just because you want to get rid of the insects, you can't do it. It's got to be a discomfort. Why? Because you're going to be killing an animal. And we'll get to that and we'll see how important that is. Most other authorities allow spraying in the air, even if nobody's in the home and is ill, as long as you leave a window open, as we said. So it comes along the Gomorrah in Shabbos. And this is really where all of this comes from. And I want you to look at this Gomorrah, because this Gomorrah is quite fascinating. It says the following. It's talking about all these like shkotzim, all these little creepy crawlies. And the Gomorrah says, Hoghorn, if you kill them, you're chayev. You're liable. Liable midoraisa from a Torah point of view. Man Tana, which is the Tana that says that. So he said, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Yirmiyah said it's Rabbi Eliezer. The Sanya we learn in a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer Omer. Rabbi Eliezer said, Hahoireg kina b'Shabbos. If you kill a lice on Shabbos, how bad would it be to kill a lice on Shabbos? I mean, we don't really have lice in our world. In the old days, there were lice. There was these things all over people's clothes. Now we don't really have them because we were so clean. But if a person would kill a louse on Shabbos, it's the same as killing a camel. Rashi says, what do you mean it's the same as killing a camel? Just because the camel's much bigger doesn't mean there's anything different with the louse. Comes along Rav Yosef and says, Maskif, he strongly objects. He says, I don't understand. Ad kan lo pligi rabbanan alei de Rabbi Eliezer ele bechina. Says that the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Eliezer only regarding to lice. Now listen carefully. The Eina Paravarava, because in the old days it was believed that a louse didn't procreate in the normal way. They didn't understand the science of it. These lice would just be all over. So they thought they were kind of like grow out of the clothes. But we know that that's not the case. And if that's not the case, well, all other abominations are calling things that they do not disagree with him, meaning that you can't kill them. So we see that anything that is going to procreate, any insect, no matter how small it is, that procreates, everybody agrees that if a person kills it or traps it in such a situation, you would be chayiv, you are obligated in at least midrabbanan. So it's quite something, because firstly we can see a lot of understanding of science that was a little bit primitive in terms of our understanding, but it's quite clear that this HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah demands a great reverence for all living creatures. And that's why here says the Rambam, Ramashim Shem Parim Varavim Mazachar V'Nakeva V'Nihavim in Afar Kamoa Perushim. He says creeping things that have a male and a female. If you kill them, it's like killing a normal animal, which is a massive thing. And then there are these other things which don't grow from which they understood didn't have a male and female growth, but they grew out of the things. They say that you're not chayav, but we don't worry about that. This is where the Hoghorn Oath comes in and says the following: a flea, a parus, hanikra bargut beloshen Arab. This bargut thing. It's a flea in Arabic. Asur letzodo. You're not allowed to capture it, to trap it. Elahim kain hu al basaro ve'uktso. So there's two things here. All of a sudden, the flea and the mosquito are the same thing. You've got a flea, you're not allowed to trap a mosquito. But if it's on your flesh and it is biting you, then what? Then you are allowed to what? To trap it. You're not allowed to kill it. So it says the Ramah on that. You have to be so careful. You can't even squash it between your fingers, like hold it between your fingers, because you might kill it. Rather, and this is talking about the last. You take it off and you throw it away. Sorry, that's the flea. But a louse, you can kill it. But if they're in your clothes, you've got to just shake it out. So there's a difference between certain animals. A flea doesn't cause you damage, it just causes you irritation. Whereas a louse could cause some type of infection. And so therefore there's certain things, when it comes to irritation, we don't kill it, we don't kill it. When it comes to danger, we do. So if you remember, there was that thing called the Zika virus. For us, the more relevant thing would be malaria. Okay, you go to the Kruger, and there are mosquitoes there. Are you allowed to kill those mosquitoes on Shabbos? I'm going to throw that out to you. What we've learned so far, is that in the event when you've got these things that are irritating, you're not allowed to kill them. You're not even allowed to capture them. Unless you do it in a different way, and that different way will allow you to kind of get away from this drabonim. But certainly, even if the mosquito is sitting on you, you're not allowed to kill it. You've got to I don't know, kind of like brush it off. Somebody once told me that they were told that the way to do it is that if you see a mosquito biting you, you actually squeeze not the mosquito, this flesh where they're biting you, and it'll pump the blood back into them, and either they'll die from that, or they'll just take off, and then it's done. It's quite grimness. I'm sorry, going on. It's quite grim, but
squeezing the blood out.
They're terrible and horrible. But it's an important din, because we don't always think about these din. Again, it's a mosquito. It's irritating me. Let me kill it. So it comes along.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Will squeezing your blood out not also be a melacha?
So that's a very good question, because you're not squeezing your blood out, which would not, that would be an issue of chabura, but in this case, you're squeezing it back into the mosquito, so it would seem to be okay. Okay, that's an interesting thing.
Got it.
But only in that case, you wouldn't be able to squeeze normally. Okay, so that's a good question. Thank you. So now we've got clear that you can't kill the mosquitoes, and you can't even trap the mosquitoes. But what happens if you're in a malaria area? Can you kill or trap those mosquitoes? Is there a difference? And the example that you find in the poskim is not malaria. The example is that Zika virus. If you remember, a few years ago, there was this virus that was coming through mosquitoes that wasn't necessarily deadly, but it certainly caused an enormous amount of discomfort, and it could damage in quite a big way. It could damage newborns, and if a woman was pregnant, it could cause miscarriage. So the question is, under those circumstances, can you kill those mosquitoes? So malaria, we know, is potentially fatal, right? Yes, it can be controlled if you get it on the right time, but it can be potentially fatal. The Zika virus for sure is potentially fatal. So in those situations, because it's a derabonim, and even if it wasn't a derabonim, because you've got a suffix pikuach nefesh, those mosquitoes can be killed. But I'm sorry to tell you, those of us who live in Johannesburg, we do not have malaria mosquitoes. Okay? So we can't. So what can we do? And that's the question. So can we put insect repellent on? So that's the question, right? Because it depends. Firstly, if you remember, and I took this directly off one of the poskim, because I thought it would be nice just to look at it in this way. So firstly, if you remember, we have an issue with generally medication. Can you take medication on Shabbos? And under certain circumstances you can, and under other circumstances you can't. We haven't got time to go into all of that now. But insect repellent is not medication, and therefore it's absolutely not a problem. However, you have to remember the different types of insect repellents. You get the insect repellents, like the tabloid in that bar, in that funny thing where you push up and you've got to push it on you, or might get it in ointments or in some type of liquids, whatever the case is. So then, how do you do it? So you can't smooth the ointment or the liquid on yourself, because you're not allowed to do that. You can, if you've already been bitten, you can soak it in water. That's something you can do even without even having been bitten, because there's no difference. You can always put yourself in water. Now, the Hoghorn Oath says the following: that one may not apply oil to bites in places where smearing oil is not common, because it's applying medicine on Shabbos. However, you can put oil on the healthy skin above the sore, and the oil will slide onto the sore. We've always got a way of kind of getting around the problem. So this is one way of getting around. You would pour it on, and you would allow the oil just to go down and feel on there. The oil is applied to the healthy skin. It's not an issue of refuah, okay? And so therefore you could do it. With young children, it's different. With young children, it's always different. With young children, it's always different because the discomfort that they feel is much, much bigger than ours. So if we are bitten, don't use ointments, don't use creams, okay? There's that whole thing of toothpaste that might work, but we don't go into that right now. But for young children, you can, right? Soothing creams or ointment may be applied directly to the bite. You put it on the bite. You can't rub it in, okay? But you can place it onto the bite without smoothing it. You can also obviously use the electric things that'll kill the repel, that will kill or repel the insects, as long as you put it in before Shabbos. Okay, but that's all very sweet and lovely. Okay, what can I do if the mosquito is buzzing around my ears? In summary, you can cry, you can yell, you can do nothing else. I know it's those, Daddy, there's a mosquito, right? It doesn't help. You can use the repellent, but you're not allowed to hit, trap, or kill the mosquito. One of the best repellent would be to use is a spray, like a liquid spray, because you just spray it on yourself, and then it will be okay. Under certain circumstances, you want to be careful not to spray it and to wet the linen, or whatever the case is, because then you might be putting yourself into an issue of possibly of schita, and which is where you might have to squeeze it because you've made it too wet. So just be careful with all those things. Now, here's the story. What happens if it is biting you or it's crawling on you? You can remove it, throw it out. You may even trap it to throw it out. Because why? Because we don't want to allow bodily pain. We don't want the tsar. We don't want the discomfort. But we have to remember something, and this is an amazing thing that the Pri Megadim says. A mosquito, I understand. When I learned, I'd never thought about this because it's not something I think about. We know what muktzah is. We know that a pen is muktzah. We know that leaves are muktzah. We know that certain things that we don't need to touch on Shabbos are muktzah. We know that an expensive miller knife is muktzah. We know what things are muktzah. We know which things aren't muktzah on the like basics. But it comes along the Pri Megadim, and he says that a mosquito is muktzah. Why is a mosquito muktzah? Because there's a certain thing called graf shel rei. Graf shel rei, so for example, if a person would leave like chicken bones that they've sucked and whatever and leave it on the table, that's considered to be, that's muktzah. It's muktzah. You can take it off because it's unpleasant. That's the reason we're allowed to remove it. But it's called graf shel rei. It's graf shel rei, and since it's vile, it's muktzah. So because you don't want it in that place, you can move it away. But it's just interesting to see that even a mosquito falls into the category of muktzah according to the Pri Megadim. So now this interesting idea that comes up, okay, and that is if the mosquito, okay, is actually bothering me so much, then why can't I trap it? Why it's not on me. It's just flying around. Why can't I trap it? Why can't I stop the mental anguish that the mosquito is giving? It can be quite dementing. In the middle of the night, this thing coming, like he says, dive bombing next to your ear, right? But it might be, but it's not physical sound. It's not physical damage. It's not physical damage. Therefore, the halacha is that we have to be careful. And it's an amazing thing that he compares this to. He compares this to a house that is burning. Hashem Yishmor, because we've experienced that in Johannesburg over the year quite a lot. So when under many circumstances, there are some that we have to go, but that's a different discussion. You're not allowed to extinguish the fire. We've seen, if you remember Rabbi Arbach, he should be well, his house burned down. It wasn't on Shabbos, but you can imagine the mental anguish, God forbid, of watching your house and everything that you own and your memories and all those things going up in flames, right? Nonetheless, you're not even allowed to violate the drabonin to put the thing out. So therefore, one should be careful to prevent the mosquito from to stop the mosquito. You have to be careful not to violate this concept of tzad of trapping it, because that would be a problem. So now, what else happens in summer? There are lizards, there are other insects, there are all these other things that come into our houses, and some people are terrified by them, adults. Some people don't really care, and children also have the same response. But the thing with children is that children's psyche is so much more sensitive, that a trauma of the nature, let's say, of a lizard in the room could really be something that could damage them forever. And since that's the case, right, Chazal said that in order to appease the fear, appease the concern, the anxiety of a child under certain circumstances, you can even violate a doraisa. Now we have to be careful that, because things have to be very carefully put into parameters. But I remember many years ago in Cape Town, at Morasha, there was a room where the kids used to hang out. They weren't really supposed to hang out there, but they hang out there. And one day, the wind was so strong that it blew the door shut, and it was so strong that it broke the lock. So now you've got these kids in this room, and they were freaking, they were screaming. So what we did is that we understood that if a child feels endangered, they're terrified, they could do things to themselves, they could try to climb out the window, they could really hurt themselves. So what happened is we broke down the door. Now, that would be allowed. Normally, you're not allowed to break down a door in a house. That would be allowed. It happened then a few weeks later. The same door had been fixed, blew again, and there was a lady with a baby inside. We were concerned about the baby, that the woman would be would freak out. She was quite claustrophobic, that she would freak out. That could damage the baby, so someone broke down the door again. So under certain circumstances, we can do things. The question is a lizard in a room the same thing? So how do you get rid of the lizard or the cockroach or that insect that you don't want or the rain spider that's coming into the room? All of those things, in the same case as the Prima Ganim said earlier on, all those things are graf shel rei, right? They muktzah. And since they muktzah, then you can do what? You can get rid of it. You can move it because it's in the way. So what one would do is take a broom and you knock the spider or the insect, whatever, and push it out of the house, right? Why is that okay? Because that's just moving it into another place. But putting something, trapping it as such, would not be allowed. Obviously, as he says, if lizards are trapped for their skins, I'm not sure who would ever do that. But if lizards are trapped for their skins, that's more severe because that's ma'amisha melacha d'oraisa. And the same thing would be with cockroaches. You should chase it out of the room with the broom. Obviously, avoid trapping it. But most importantly, our natural inclination, I know that they're very hard to kill, but our natural inclination is to kill these things. But we're not allowed to kill these things. We're not allowed to kill these things because that's a malacha, at the very least. That's a drabanan, and according to many, it's even a doraisa. And so therefore we see that the halachas of Shabbos, when it comes to these things, and I think it's very relevant in our world, if you leave your light on a Friday night because you don't have a proper time switch, so if you leave your light on, so then it's inevitable that you will have mosquitoes flying around in that room. And so therefore, for us to really be able to understand the importance of what we can do and what we can't do with those and the other insects that fly in was just something that popped into my head. I thought it's important to think about. And the reason why it popped into my head is that similar to the chopsticks that we spoke about last week, is that there were the mosquitoes on Friday night that were driving me bonkers. And by mistake, I killed one. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, what have I done? Going back, I realized that I'd done some very bad things. And, we'll have to do tshuva on those things. But please God, we won't have to worry about that because we've learned better. Use your insect repellent. Don't kill the insects. Trap them if you really need to. But try not to kill anything because that would be, according to some, even a malacha d'oraisa. Have a beautiful day. Have a beautiful Shabbos, a beautiful week. And please God, we'll see you guys next week. Please remember, if there are any questions that you have, please let me know so that we can discuss those in a proper way. Have a great